start the Gemara today on the Fain Zayin Amud Beis. We'll begin again from Tanu Rabbanan. Here it's talking about the halachas of a Mitzri, where generally speaking the halacha is that after 3 generations they're mutter to enter into Klal Yisrael, but not before. And here there's a machlokes, which we had in the Mishnah, whether this Isser of a Mitzri that was Megayah marrying into Klal Yisrael refers only to a Zachar, a Mitzri, or even to a Nekeva, a Mitzris. Tan Rabbanan, Banim v'loy banais. The pasuk, when it speaks about Mitzri, it says Banim ashivaldu lehem. So therefore, Divrei Rab Shimon. Rab Shimon says that the Isser is only for Banim, but not for banais. For the Nekevis of the Mitzrim, they are immediately allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael. Amar Rab Yehuda says, no, the language of the pasuk is Banim ashivaldu lehem, dar shlishi, that the 3rd generation could marry. So it says Yivaldu. Why does it say that the ones that are born? Hakasav talam beleida. The pasuk is saying that this is all dependent on birth. That if the ones that are born, they're the ones that are aser. And so that includes even an akeva that's born. You have to wait 3 generations, even after Geiros, to marry into Klal Yisrael. Amar Rabbi Yechanan said now regarding Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Amar Rabbi Yehuda hakasav talam beleida. If not for this, that Rabbi Yehuda said that the Torah says that this all depends on birth. That's the source of the Isser. He would not be able to find his hands and feet in Beis Medrash, which means he would have nothing to stand upon. There would be a very strong question on Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. What's the very strong question on Rabbi Yehuda's opinion? Kivin da mamar, since Rabbi Yehuda himself has said, Kahal Geirim Ikri Kahal, that even a ger is also included in the term Kahal that the Torah says. When the Torah uses the term Kahal, the congregation of Klal Yisrael, that includes Geirim as well. So what would this mean? That a Mitzri, what's the Isser of a Mitzri? A Mitzri is not allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael. So if so, a Mitzri, which is not allowed to marry into the Kahal of Klal Yisrael, would not be allowed to marry any Geirim either, according to Rabbi Yehuda, because Geirim are Kahal as well. So if so, the question would be, Mitzri Sheni, a 2nd generation Mitzri, B'ma Yitar. How would he ever come to be a 3rd generation Mitzri? How is that even possible? The pasuk says the 3rd generation Mitzri could then marry into Klal Yisrael. But how are you ever going to have a 3rd generation Mitzri? If according to Rabbi Yehuda, the Gedim that are Megayer are already considered to be part of Kol, so how is a Mitzri ever marrying anybody to become kosher into Klal Yisrael? Right, so now if you're going to say that a Mitzri cannot marry a Mitzris, right, what's the simple answer to what the Gemara is saying over here? Very simple. The Mitzri Sheni marries a Mitzris, which is a Shniya rather, and then the child born will be the 3rd generation. But if Rabbi Yehuda would agree to Rab Shimon that the Mitzris is a regular Geiris, she does not have the status of a Mitzri, and then she's like a regular Geiris. If so, a Mitzri Sheni cannot marry a Mitzris Sheni. So if so, a Mitzri Sheni, there's nobody he can marry. So how are you ever going to have a 3rd generation Mitzri? So, but Rabbi Yehuda, since Rabbi Yehuda holds that a Mitzris Sheni is the same like a Mitzri Sheni, so a Mitzri Sheni could marry a Mitzris Sheni, and therefore that's how you get a 3rd generation of a Mitzri. That's the explanation for Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Says the Gemara, no, there's maybe without this, even if Rabbi Yehuda would agree to Rab Shimon that a Mitzris is a regular Geiris, Dilma, but perhaps the E of Avanasif, maybe the pasuk is saying that B'di'evet, if it happened that this Mitzri got married to a Bas Yisrael, even though it's not allowed, and they got married Ba'aveda, and then the child that's born is going to be a 3rd generation Mitzri. Maybe that's what the pasuk was saying, that then the child will be mutter. Says the Gemara, no, the E loy kasav krah. The pasuk is not telling you a case of B'di'evet. It's not coming to tell you a heter that the 3rd generation of Mitzri could marry into Klal Yisrael in a case that they did an Aveda B'di'evet and the Mitzri married the Yisrael. Fragt the Gemara, is that true? The pasuk doesn't tell you a halacha which is based on a B'di'evet when you did an Aveda. Had a mamzer di'i. The whole existence of a mamzer, which is coming through an Aveda of the father, had a relation which is a chi of Kodesh, and the Torah is coming to tell you the halacha of a mamzer when this Aveda happens, that he's also to marry into Klal Yisrael. So it's also the v'kas v'kra, it's a b'di'evet that happens of a Isser, and the Torah writes the halacha. So the Gemara answers, not the same thing. The li'isura Kosav. The Torah is writing you if such a thing happens, and therefore it creates an Isser. Yeah, that the Torah is coming to teach, that the mamzer born from this relationship will be Asr. But the lehetere lekosav. But for the Torah to come and write a heter of a mitzri that the third generation is allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael, so to come and tell you a heter based on an aveda which happened, the Torah is not going to come to tell you a heter based on an aveda. But we do have a case where we see the Torah tells you a heter based on an aveda. Hare machze gerushasai. A person that returned and remarried a wife that he divorced. And this is only when she went and got married to someone else first, and then that person divorced her, and now you're remarrying the wife you divorced. So that's a case of an Aveda. And lahateda. And over there the Torah comes to write a heter as well. Rashi here brings, what's the heter the Torah writes? Because the Torah says there, Teyeva he. That what she did is a Teyeva. So we learn from the word he that she is a Teyeva, but the children are not Teyeva. The children are totally kosher. So the Torah comes and tells you the heter, benegeh to the children that are born from this marriage, even though this is a case of an Aveda. The kasve, the Torah writes it. Answers the Gemara now. The hasam mishum ike isuru the kasve. The Torah is writing there the halacha regarding the iser, that you're not allowed to remarry this wife that you divorced. It adds the word he to also be medayik, the heter, benigeh to the child, that the child will be mutter. But the main reason the Torah wrote it is for the iser. But over here regarding Mitzri, the Torah would not write the heter of the third generation of a Mitzri if the only way you get the third generation is through an Aveda. So therefore it must be that you can get to the third generation of a Mitzri without an Aveda, because a Mitzri, according to Rabbi Yehuda, could marry a Mitzris, she's in the same status as him, and then the child born will be a third generation Mitzri. Tana Rabbanon, we learned in the Braise, it explains the psukim that it says by Mitzri. So again, Gemara quoted the pasuk before, you have it here on the side of the Gemara, Banim ashi yivoldu lehem, Dar shlishi yave lehem b'kal Hashem. So this Braise will explain the different things in this pasuk. So that the first thing the Braise explains is as follows: Im nemar banim. If we would say in the pasuk, now that it says in the pasuk banim, so lama nema dairis. Why does it have to say the term dairis? The pasuk could just simply say ben shlishi yave lehem b'kal Hashem, that the third son comes b'kal Hashem. Why is it necessary b'chlal to say anything about dairis? Vim nema dairis. If it's saying dar shlishi yavelem b'kal Hashem, so lama nema banim. Why does it have to say in the beginning of the pasuk banim ashiv odalem? Let it just say the dar shlishi yavelem b'kal Hashem. So it seems like the pasuk is redundant. So the Gemara explains. So the Braise that is explains im nema banim v'loy nema dairis. If it would say ben shlishi, that a third son could come to Kal Hashem, and it would not say a third generation, then I would interpret it and I would say as follows: Ben Rishain, a Mitzri that has a first son, Visheni, a second son also. He's forbidden to enter into Klal Yisrael. Shlishi. But that first Mitzri that was Megaya, if he has a third child, a third son, Mutter, he could enter into Klal Yisrael. In other words, I wouldn't think it means that the grandson could come into Klal Yisrael. I would think it means the third son born to the first Mitzri could enter into Klal Yisrael. So Lakach Nema Dairis. So that's why it says Dairis, the third generation. So you should know it means only the grandson. Vim nema dairis. On the other hand, if it would just say Dor shlishi yavelem b'kal Hashem, so then I would make a different mistake. V'lei nema banim, and it would not say banim. Hayisi aimer. Then I would say that maybe the term dairis doesn't even refer b'chlal to the third generation of the Mitzri. Rather, I would say la'oisan an ha'imdim al Har Sinai. The Eibishter is telling the Yidden of that generation by Har Sinai that you, this generation, cannot marry a Mitzri. The next generation of Yidden cannot marry a Mitzri. The third generation of Yidden, they can marry into a Mitzri. So I would think the term Dairis refers to the Yidden, that the third generation of Yidden could marry a Mitzri. So therefore, Lekach Nema Banim. So therefore it says Banim, that it's speaking about the Banim of the Mitzri, that the third generation of the Mitzri could marry into Klal Yisrael. The next thing the Braise explains is, it says in the pasuk twice the term Lehem. Banim Ashivoldu Lehem, Dor Shlishi Yavel Lehem B'kal Hashem. Why does it say twice Lehem? So the first Lehem, it means Mehem Menei. Lehem means that you count from them. What does it mean from them? From the ger itself. There would be two ways how to count, 3 generations. Maybe you would think the first generation is the son, and that's from the first generation. So it says no, you count from the ger himself. He is already the first generation Mitzri. His son is already the second generation. That's the first Lehem. Then when it says the second time Lehem, what is it coming to teach? Again, Dar Shlishi Yave Lehem B'kal Hashem, Haleich Achar Psulan. That if the father is a Mitzri and the mother is not a Mitzri, then this was actually a marriage ba'aveda. The mother is a Bas Yisrael. So who's the yichus of the child? The yichus of the child goes after the one that's puzzle. and therefore the child will be considered to be a Mitzri. So that's what Lahem is saying, that as long as Lahem, there's one father or mother, that is, one parent that's a Mitzri, you go after the Psul. Right to the Gemara continues.
The child's not a Yid?
No, he will be a Yid because the father was Megayer. We're talking about the father is Megayer. Right? The Achapsulon means the fact that he'll have the status of a Mitzri, that he'll have to wait to a third generation to be Mutter. And not you don't go after the parent, which is a Yid, which you don't have to wait 3 generations. Now, a similar diak, the Gemara says over here in this pasuk, V'itzrich lemichtav lahem. The pasuk here says, Dar shlishi yave lahem, or actually we're going back to the beginning of the pasuk. Banim ashi yivoldu lahem. So what did we say? What does lahem mean? Lahem goes on the Mitzri himself, that he is the first generation. And then v'itzrich lemichtav asher yivoldu. But the Torah has to also use the term asher yivoldu. So Rashi says the Gemara is actually sort of addressing a contradiction, because when it says the term yivoldu, it sounds like that the lahem that we count the 3 generations from yivoldu, from the child that's born. He's the 3rd generation. When it says lahem is going on the first, on the one that's actually megayer. So what is the meaning of these 2 terms in the pasuk, lahem and yivoldu? So the Gemara explains, if we would only say the term Yivoldu, the one that's born, I would say that you count the 3 generations from the son that's born. He's the 1st generation. Torah says count for them, referring to the first ger, that were the Mitzri that was Megayer. On the other hand, because of Rahmana lahem, if we would only say lahem, then I would think to say Mitzris mu'uberes shenis gaira, a Mitzris that was pregnant, that was Megayer, hiu benachad, that she and her son are considered to be the same generation. So therefore, Kasav Rahman Asher Yivoldu, the Torah writes Asher Yivoldu to tell me that even if she was Nizgaya when she was pregnant, but the child that's going to be born is going to be considered already a 2nd generation. The mother's 1 generation, and Yivoldu, the child born, is another generation. Weiter, the Gemara says, just like we have a diak over here, why it says the term lahem, there's a similar diak by Mamzer, where it also uses an extra word like this. V'itzrich lemichtav lahem, the Torah here is saying the term lahem, that you count the 3 generations starting from the Mitzri himself, the first Mitzri that was Megayer, and v'itzrich lemichtav loy gabe Mamzer. And then there's also the loy that it says by Mamzer, the lashon of the pasuk there is, lo yave Mamzer b'kal Hashem, gam doir asiri lo yave loy b'kal Hashem. So it uses the term, why does it say loy there? And over there as well, the pasuk, the term loy is also saying that you count from the mamzer himself. Why does it say the word loy? The term loy that it says by the mamzer is coming to teach me, similar to what we said over here, that lahem is teaching me that you go after the parent that's pasul. If you have one parent that's a mitzri and one parent that's not, so you go after the parent that's pasul. It's the same thing also with a mamzer. That if you have one parent that's a mamzer and one parent that's not a mamzer, so loy means that you go after the parent which is a mamzer and the child will be a mamzer. So why does it have to say this halacha that you go after the parent which is pasul, both regarding a mitzri and regarding a mamzer? So the Gemara explains, if the Torah would write that halacha here, so I would say here there's a reason for this chumrah. This is because the child has 2 parents and one of the parents is pasul. One of the parents was a mitzri, so he's coming from a tip of psula. Therefore over here there's this chumrah that you go after the parent which is pasul. Of a mamzer, the ba mitipik sheira, but in the case of a mamzer, he's born from 2 parents that are both kosher yidden. Elamai, they had a relationship which is an aveda, therefore the child that's born is a mamzer. But originally a mamzer comes from a tipuk sheira. So therefore I would think that over here, this chumrah that you go after the parent which is pasul, maybe that doesn't apply. So it has to write it by mamzer. And then in reverse, if the Torah would write this chumrah only regarding mamzer, that you go after the parent which is pasul, I would say, a mamzer is a psul that he can never enter into Klal Yisrael. So maybe here I apply this chumrah that you go after the parent which is pasul. But over here, regarding mitzri, that can marry into Klal Yisrael after 3 generations, I would say that chumrah doesn't apply. Therefore it has to say here as well, lahem, that this chumrah does apply. Amar Rabba Baba Chane, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Mitzri Sheni Shenasa Mitzris Rishayna. A Mitzri that he is a 2nd generation Mitzri, and he married a Mitzris, and she is a 1st generation Mitzri. So after who do we go? After the father, to count the generation of the child born. Do we go after the father or after the mother? B'na shlishi avoy. The son will be a third generation Mitzri, meaning what he's saying is you go after the father. So Rashi clarifies what this means is Rabbi Yechanan is saying that this that we just said, that you always go after the parent which is pasul, that only applies when you have one parent which is a Yid and one parent which is a Mitzri. Then I say you go after the Mitzri which is pasul. But if both of the parents are Mitzrim, Elamai, one is a first generation Mitzri, one is a second generation Mitzri, there I don't go after the one that's more pasul, according to Rabbi Yechanan. We had before an opinion of the Gemara in the Gemara that you do, but Rabbi Yechanan is saying you're going to go after the father. If the father is a Sheni, the son will already be a Shlishi and he's kosher to marry into Klal Yisrael. So Gemara says, Alma Kasavad, I see Rabbi Yechanan holds, Basa Didei Shadin Alei, that regarding the yichus of this mitzvah, you go after the father. Master Rav Yosef, so Rav Yosef asks, Rav Tarfon says, Yechaylin mamzer litoir. I can give you a way how a mamzer could become tar, to be able to marry into Klal Yisrael, even though usually any descendant of a mamzer is also forever. How do you do this? Keitzat. Mamzer nasa shivcha. A mamzer could marry a shivcha. He's not allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael, but he can marry a shivcha kananis. What happens with that son of this shivcha? Avlad eved. So the child that's born will be an eved. The child that's born is an eved like the mother. So he's now an eved kanani. Then what do? Shichrira, you can free this eved kanani. And now once you free him, nimtza ben chayrin, he becomes free and he becomes a regular yid. And now he's totally kosher. So Alma, what do I see from this eitzah that Rav Tarfon said to be mitayar a mamzer? Basa dida shadinale, that the child that's born, the father is a mamzer, the mother is a shivcha. What do I say? The yichus goes after the mother and the child will be an eved, and then I could free him to make him kosher. And the yichus does not go after the father. Answers the Gemara, you're right. But again, the Gemara answers that we do go after the father, but over there it's different. Shani Hasam, that case is different to Amakra, because there the pasuk says, Isha viladea tiyaladena, that a shivcha that gives birth, the children belong to the master. So because the children that she gives birth to belong to the master, that's the reason why over there the yichus of the children go after the mother, because they're both enslaved to the master, but not usually. Otherwise, Rabbi Yechanan said that the yichus goes after the father. Masif Rav has another question, and this is the Gemara that was quoted before as well. Amar Rabbi Yehuda said, Minyamin ger mitzri hayali chaver mitalmid Rabbi Akiva. Minyamin, he was a ger, he was a mitzri, and he was my friend, he was from the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva. Amar, and he said, Ani mitzri rishin, I'm a first generation mitzri. V'nasasi mitzri shayna, and I married a first generation mitzris that was Megaya. Asi livni mitzris shniya, let me marry off my son to a second generation mitzris. Kidei sheyehei ben bini ravilad b'kol, and then my grandson will be able to enter into Klal Yisrael. That's what Minyamin would say. Now, if you're going to say that what Rabbi Yechanan said before is right, that the yichus of a son by a mitzri goes after the father. So why is he saying that he has to marry off his son to a mitzri shniya? Afil rishayna nami. Even if his son marries a first generation mitzri, but still the yichus will go after the father, and his son is a second generation mitzri. So either way, the grandchild will be mutter into Klal Yisrael. Answers the Gemara, you're right. Rabbi Yechanan said to the Tana about this story that Tni Rishayna. You can say that story is that he said that I can marry off my son even to a first generation mitzri, and still my grandson will be mutter into Klal Yisrael. This is Rabbi Yechanan's opinion. Now the Gemara brings a different version of what Rabbi Yechanan said, the exact opposite. Rabbi Dimi said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan that if it's a mitzri sheni, shenasa mitzris rishayna, so who do you go after? Who does the son, the yichus, go after? Bina sheni. The son goes after the mother. The mother is a mitzris rishayna. The yichus of the son goes after the mother. So what do you see from this? Alma, you see basa ime shadinanle. The yichus of the son goes after the mother. What's the reason why the yichus of the son goes after the mother? Usually by Goyim, the yichus always goes after the father. What happened over here that the yichus goes after the mother? So as we'll see in the continuation of the Gemara understands now that this is based on a concept called Ubar Yerech Imai, which means that a child that's born from the mother is really one with the mother himself. So the Ubar, because the Ubar is one with the mother himself, so therefore the status benigeh to this halacha of the mitzri, what generation mitzri he is, the child that's born, it goes after the mother. And not, we don't follow over here the rule of yichus, usually that you go after the father. That's the way the Gemara understands this now, as you'll see in the continuation of the Gemara. Amalei Abaye, so Abaye now says, based on this chiddush of Rabbi Yechanan, that the Mitzri goes after the mother. So now, Elahadam, Rabbi Yechanan said the halacha regarding a korban chatos. So before I read the Gemara inside, this next piece of Gemara is going to be about korban chatos, and it's based on two halacha l'Moshe Misinai that there is by a korban chatos. There's one halacha l'Moshe Misinai by a korban chatos that if a korban chatos that you are makdish has a baby, what happens to that baby? So the baby has to be has to be left to die. You can't use it for anything. It goes lemisa. That's one halacha b'negeya to the korban chatos. Another halacha by korban chatos is if you have two korbanis chatos that you were makdish. How does that happen? Let's say a person was makdish one korban chatos and it got lost, so he was makdish a second korban chatos, and then he found the first one. What happens to the second korban chatos? So the halacha is that you use only one. And the second one it has to go out to graze and until it gets a mum, and then you could redeem it. Okay, those are the two halachas of the halacha l'Moshe Messina when you get to korban chatos. Okay, so now let's see the Gemara inside. Now Ela hadam Rabbi Yechanan, so Rabbi Yechanan said as follows: Hifrish chatos mi'u beres. You were mafresh the chatos and it was already pregnant when you were makdish it, and v'yolda, and then it gave birth. So what do you do now? Which one do you use as a korban? So Rabbi Yechanan said, Ratzam miskaper ba. If you want, you use the mother for the korban chatos, and Ratzam miskaper b'vlada. If you want, you can use the child, the baby born, as the korban chatos. That's the halacha of Rabbi Yechanan. So now the question is, does this fit with what Rabbi Yechanan said before, b'nigeya, to the Mitzri, that the yichus goes after the mother, and the basis of this is because uba yerach imay, because the baby is one with the mother. It's like one entity with the mother himself. Now, if you're going to say ubar lav yerach imayu, that the baby that's born is not like a thigh of the mother, it's not one entity with the mother itself, so then I'll tell you as follows: Havelei kemafrish shtei chatois la'achrayis. So then, this case of a person that was makdish a korban chatas that was pregnant is similar to a person that was makdish two korbanos chatas la'achrayis. La'achrayis means because if one gets lost, he's going to have the other one to bring. So you were makdish two korbanos chatas for one chiyuv that you have to bring a chatas. What's the halacha of you makdish two korbanos chatas for one chiyuv that you have? V'amar Avaishi, and Avaishi said about this: Hifrish shtei chatois la'achrayis. If you are makdish two korbanos chatos because you want to have one in case the other one gets lost, miskaper ba'achas mehen, so you use one of them, and then va'asheni tira, and then the second one you don't use and you leave it to graze until it gets a mum, and then you redeem it. So over here the halacha as well would apply when you were makdish this korban chatos that was pregnant. In essence, you were makdish two korbanos chatos. Why? Because the baby that this mother was pregnant with is not one entity with the mother. The baby is like a separate entity, and therefore you will makdish two korbanos chatos. If you makdish two korbanos chatos, so then you use whichever one you want, and then the other one goes out to graze until it gets a mum. And that's the halacha that Rabbi Yechanan said, that you could use whichever one you want. But if you're going to say that the baby in the mother's womb is like part of the body of the mother itself, so then when you will makdish over here, this korban chatos that has a baby, so it's pregnant, that can't be compared to being makdish two separate korbanos chatos. The baby is part of the mother. So if so, havale vlad chatos. So in such a case, it should be considered to be like the halacha of a vlad chatos. What's the halacha of a korban chatos that has a baby? Vlad chatos lemisa. The halacha is that the baby that's born goes to misa. It has to be left to die. You can't use it as a korban b'chlal. So how could Rabbi Yechanan over here say that you can use this vlad of the chatos to be used as a korban? Right? So this halacha of vlad chatos lemisa, usually it's said regarding a case that regarding a person that was makdish a chatos, a korban, a behemoth that was not pregnant, and then it gave birth later. And regarding that, you say that the vlad goes lemisa. The question is, what's going to be the halacha if you were makdish this behemoth and it was already pregnant from the time when you were makdish it? Do I also apply this halacha that the vlad that's born has to go to misa? Or do I say no, if it was pregnant at the time that you were makdish it, so then that baby that's going to be born does not have to go to misa? What does it depend on? If the baby is uba yerech imai, so then I say that it's a vlad. You won't makdish two separate behemoths. You will makdish one behemoth. You will makdish the mother. And that vlad that's born, once it's born, now it becomes a separate entity. It's a vlad and it has to go to misa. But if you're going to say that the ubar is not yerech imai, so from the moment that you will makdish the mother that was pregnant, it's like you will makdish two behemoths. And if it's two behemoths, so then you could be makriv one, or you could be makriv the other. So the question is, from here, since Rabbi Yochanan says that you could be makdish one, or you could bring a carbon one, that is, you could bring one as a carbon, or you could bring the other as a carbon, that shows you that the ubar that you will makdish together with the mother is lav yerech imai. It's not one with the mother. So that's the question on what Rabbi Yochanan said before, benigeh to the mitzri, that the child goes after the mother because the child is one with the mother. Ishtik, so he did not answer this question. Amalei, so then he himself gave the one that asked the question, he himself gave the answer. Dil mishani hasam, maybe over there's a different halacha, tichsiv ashi yivoldu. Going back to the case of the mitzri. You know why by the mitzri, the child, the yichus of the child goes after the mother. It's not based on this, that uba yerech imai, that there's a special connection between the child and the mother, that the child is like part of the body of the mother. It's because of the lashon of the pasuk that it says there, asher yuvoldu, hakas of tali beleida, that the yichus over there goes after the mother, that the child is born from the mother's body. That's the only reason, but not because of this concept of uba yerech imai. So therefore, there's no connection to this halacha that we brought up over here from the karban chatas. Amalei. So he told him that Rav Dimi told Abaye karkafna, great person. It's a karkafna means a person with a great head. He says he's an expression. He told him, great person, chazise lereishach beni amudi. I saw your head between the beams. Ki amar Rabbi Yochanan lahash maita. When Rabbi Yochanan said this halacha that the mitzri goes after the mother. In other words, he was telling him, this is not your own svara. You must have heard this from Rabbi Yochanan himself when he said the halacha that the reason why you go after the mother is because of the pasuk of asher yivoldu that it says. So now the Gemara, now that we know the reason why by a mitzri the yichus goes after the mother, so the Gemara asks at this time, the only reason why by a mitzri the yichus goes after the mother is because of the pasuk asher yivoldu. But otherwise, basar avua shadin and lay, the yichus goes after the father. So if so, fragt the Gemara, ela hada amar Rava. Now there's this halacha that Rava said, nachris mu'uberes shenis gaira, a guy that's pregnant that is being megayer, and she goes to the mikveh when she's megayer, b'nayin sarech tefillah. So the son that's born later will not have to go through a tefillah again for his geiros. The tefillah that the mother does works for the son as well. So the question is, amai ain't sarech tefillah, why don't you need a tefillah for the son? So if you're going to say that ubar is yerech imai, so then you understand that the son doesn't need any additional geiros because the tefillah of the mother works for the son as well, because the ubar is part of the body of the mother and you're doing the geiros for the body of the mother. But if ubar lav yerech imai, if the ubar is like a separate entity in the mother's womb, so after this child is born, he's a separate entity, you should need a separate tefillah for him. Now if you'll argue and say that there's a halach and hilchas tefillah that explains this, Mishum de Rabbi Yitzchak says, the Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, devar teire, that min ha-teire the halacha is, rubai umakbid alav, if there's a chatzitza, if you have something that's blocking water to come to your body when you're toivel, even most of your body, if you're particular about it, then chaitzitz, then this is a chatzitza, you have to do tefillah again. But rubai shaina makbid, even if it's a chatzitza on most of your body, but if you're not particular, you don't care about that chatzitza, so then ain't a chaitzitz. It's not a chatzitza. So maybe over here you're going to say that the child is in the mother's womb, and therefore the water doesn't reach the child, the mother's body is a chatzitza, but because the mother doesn't care about this, I mean the fact that her body is blocking the water to come to the child, she doesn't care, so therefore it's not a chatzitza. The Gemara says you can't say that. Because Rav Kahana said about this, Lo shanu el rubai. This is only regarding most of the body that has a chatzitza. Avol kulai. But if there's a chatzitza on most of the body, chaitzitz, then definitely it is a chatzitza. Here the child is in the mother's womb, completely covered, no water touches him at all. So how could this tefillah help for the child? So the only way to explain this is to say ubar is yerech imai, part of the mother's body. Answers the Gemara, no, not necessarily. Shani ubar dahainu rabisei. By ubar, it's different, even if I say ubar lav yerechimai, but this is natural the way a child grows in the mother's womb, and therefore, it's not considered to be a chatzitza for that reason. So it is based on Hilchas Chatzitza that because this is the way the child is born and grows in the mother's womb, so it's not a Chatzitza. What it says now another halacha in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, Kiyasa Ravinam Rabbi Yechanan, B'umais, B'chlal, when it comes to the nations of the world, Halech Achar HaZachar. The Yichus goes always after the father. Nizgairu, after their Megayer, Halech Achar Pogum. So over there, the Yichus goes after the one that's more blemished. And the Gemara will explain what that means. Achar Pogum Shebishneim, that is, the one that's more blemished amongst the parents. So the Gemara explains both of these parts of these statements. When it comes to the Goyim, you always go after the Zachar. So you see this in the Braise. The Tanya, it says in the Braise, from where do you know that if a Goy of any of the nations, Shaba ala Kananis, so he got married to a Kananis, so the halacha is, when you get to the 7 nations of Eretz Yisrael, you're not allowed to keep them alive. But when you get to any other nations of the world, you are allowed to keep them alive. So over here you have a father that comes from other nations, and he got married to a Cananis from the 7 nations. For Hailid Ben, and they had a son. So now what's the yichus of this son? So how do you know you're allowed to buy him as an eved, and the yichus goes after the father? Because the pasuk says when it talks about from where you're going to buy an eved, and also from those bnei at-toshavim, which means from other nations of the world that come to live amongst you, mehem tiknu, you can buy from them an eved. Rashi here explains that the seder is that the father usually goes to join the mother where the mother is living. Not the other way around. The mother doesn't usually go to join the father where the father was living. So therefore when it says Mibnei Toshavim Hagaram Yimachem, what does Toshavim mean? That these are Goyim, the father from another place, came and married a Cananis in Eretz Yisrael, and now he settled in Eretz Yisrael. So since the father is from the other nations, so therefore the son, the Yichus goes after the father. This is what I see over in the pasuk, that it's saying that the Yichus goes after the father, therefore you could buy him as an Eved. Yachal afilo, I would think the reverse is also true. Echad min ha-Kananim shobal achas minu umais, that if the father is a Kanani and he marries a mother that comes from one of the other nations, v'hailid ben, and the son they give a birth to a son, shater shoylik noise be'eved, that here the yichus would go after the mother and you could buy him as an eved. So Talmud Leima, there's a pasuk that says, Asher hoylidu ba'artzachem, that they gave birth in Eretz Yisrael, which means menanoiladim ba'artzachem, that only those that are born in Eretz Yisrael, meaning that the mother comes from Eretz Yisrael. So over there, I say that that you can buy the son as an eved. So again, noiladim ba'artzachem means that the mother is in Eretz Yisrael and the father comes to join the mother in Eretz Yisrael. So we know now the father is not from the 7 nations. So therefore, there the son, you can buy him as an eved, but v'loi min hagarim ba'artzachem, but not in the case where the father is from Eretz Yisrael and the mother was not from Eretz Yisrael. So then, in such a case, what happens is that the child was born where the mother was, outside of Eretz Yisrael, and now he's coming back to live with his father in Eretz Yisrael. So because his father is in Eretz Yisrael and his father is from the 7 nations, from them you cannot buy an eved. So from here, this is the source from where I see this concept that when it comes to the nations of the world, the yichus always goes after the father and not after the mother. So to Gemara, what's the next part of the statement that Rabbi Yechanan said? After Gedus, so regarding the parents, you go after the parent that's more blemished. B'mai, what's the case here? If we're talking about a Mitzri, one parent is a Mitzri and the other parent is an Amoinis. These are the 2 nations that married to one another after they were Megayer. So my pogum shebishneim. Why are you saying that you go after the one that's more blemished? Isba. Amayni v'loy amaynis. We know that an amaynis is b'chlal not a pogum. She's a regular giyaris and she could marry into Klal Yisrael. So why are we calling the mother a pogum? Ella, rather the case that Rabbi Yechanan was speaking about was ba'amayni shenasa mitzris. The amayni married the mitzris. So now what we say is as follows. If they give birth to a Zachar, so then I say Shadya Basar Amayni. So this Isser of the Zachar goes after the father, which is an Amayni, and therefore this Zachar will be also forever to marry into Klal Yisrael, like his father, which is an Amayni. In Nekeva Have, if the child that's born is a Nekeva, so if you're going to say that this Nekeva, her Yichus goes after her father, she's going to be an Amaynis and she's mutter to go into Klal Yisrael immediately. So in such a case, Shadya Basa Mitzris. I put the yichus after the pogrom, which is the mitzris, and shall have to wait 3 generations to enter into Klal Yisrael, like the halacha is by a mitzris. Sagt Heilige Mishneh, Mamzerin und Nisinin Asurin, Mamzerin and Nisinin are those that were Megayer from the 7 nations in Eretz Yisrael, from the Gevainim, and their Gedus was not really fully accepted, and because they came with trickery, and Yeshua made them water carriers and so on. So those are the Nisinim. So they are Asr to marry into Klal Yisrael, Isur and Isur Olam, and their Isur is forever. Echad Scharim and Echad Nekevis, and their Isser applies both to Scharim and Nekevis. Amar Reish Lakish said about the halacha of a mamzer. Mamzeres lachas haradoris muteres. A mamzeres, after 10 generations, she's allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael. So this is speaking again specifically about a mamzeres, and a keva, a mamzer, after 10 generations she can marry into Klal Yisrael. Why? Because Yalif Asidi me Amayni and Mayavi. We learn out Asidi from what it says by Amayni and Mayavi. And Rashi explains that this Gzeirishava of Asidi is actually coming to teach me not this halacha of the heter that the mamzeres could marry into Klal Yisrael, but really this Gzeirishava is coming to teach me an Isser, because by mamzer the lashon of the pasuk is that Gam Doir Asidi lo Yavilem, that the 10th Gam Doir Asiri lo Yavilem B'Kal Hashem, that till the 10th generation you can't marry into Klal Yisrael. That's what it says by mamzer. What does it say by Amayni Mayavi? It also says there the lashon Doir Asiri, but over there the pasuk adds Ad Olam, forever. So the Gzeirishava is coming to teach me that just like by Amayni and Mayavi it means forever, not only 10 generations, by mamzer as well it means forever, not only 10 generations. But now, based on this Gzeirishava, Reish Lakish says you also learn out Ma'ala Halon Nekevis, just like by Aman and Mayav, the Isser is not for Nekevis Mutarais, Afkan Nekevis Mutarais. So too over here by a Mamzer, based on this Gzeirishava, I say we apply the Gzeirishava not only for the Isser but also for the Heter to say that the Nekevis will be allowed. Says the Gemara, if so, if you're learning out from there, Imalalon miyad, just like by Amayni, the Nekeva is mutter first generation. Afkan miyad, I should say over here regarding a mamzer, that a mamzeres should be mutter right away. Says the Gemara, no, we can't learn that, because ki ahani gzeirishava me'asiri ve'elech. The gzeirishava is only needed for after the 10th generation. Until the 10th generation, it says by mamzer himself that it's aser. And Rashi says the word mamzer means mum zar, which includes even a nekeva, that there's a mum over here. But past the 10th generation, since it does not say by mamzer itself, and you're only learning it from Amayni and Mayavi, over there it says ad olam, so there I compare it to Amayni and Mayavi to say that nekevas will be mutter just like Amayni and Mayavi. Fragt the Gemara, but what did it say in the Mishnah? It says that the Isser is forever, and it said Echad Scharim v'Echad Nekeva is both for Scharim and Nekeva. This is forever. So it says clearly not what like Reish Lakish said. And says the Gemara, Loi Kashya. This is not a question. Our Mishnah is Kamanda Omar Doin Mina Umina. Let me say again, Ha means Reish Lakish's opinion. Reish Lakish's opinion is like the one that says, Doin Mino Mino. Rashi says this is a machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua in Masechta Chulin when it comes to a Gzeirishava. So you're learning out from another place. Do you learn out everything? You apply everything from that place you learn out, or you don't necessarily apply everything? So Reish Lakish says, Doin Mino, you learn out from where you're learning out, Umina, and you learn everything out from there. So over here, what this means is, the original Gzeirishava was said to learn out the Isser, that it goes past 10 generations, just like by Amayni and Mayavi it goes past 10 generations, B'nigeya to Mamzer it also goes past 10 generations. But then once I'm learning it out from there, so I could only apply the Isser past 10 generations, like the source from where I learned it out from, which is only for a Zachar and not from a Nekeva. But in our Mishnah here, his command Amma goes like the other opinion that says, Dain mina v'oiki basra, that you do learn out the Gzeirishava from there regarding past 10 generations that the mamzer should be aser, but then you apply it back to the halacha over here, that over here there is no heter for a nekeva. I don't have to include also that detail from the source where I'm learning it out, that the issa past 10 generations will only be for a zachar and not for a nekeva. So that's the machlekes. The question was asked to Rabbi Eliezer, Mamzeres lachas haradari mao. What is his opinion? What does he hold? The Mamzeres after 10 generations, what's going to be the halacha? Regarding the in the keva, whether it's going to be mutter or asa. Amalehem, so he said, Mi yitn li dar shlishi v'atarenu. Let me see, show me where there's a third generation of a mamzer, and I'll see if I can make him tired. So what was he saying? So the Gemara explains, Alma Kasava, we see that Rabbi Eliezer holds Mamzeira loichaya, that the Eibishter makes that a mamzer shouldn't live. We don't want a mamzer to get mixed into Klal Yisrael, so the Eibishter makes that the mamzer should not live. And V'chein Amar Ravuna also said Mamzeira loichaya, that a mamzer does not live. Fragt the Gemara, but v'ho'anant nan mamzeira in asurin. But in our Mishnah, we learned the halacha that a mamzer is us, and that the isurin is oilam, that the isur is forever. Why is the Mishnah saying this halacha if a mamzer doesn't live? Amar Rav Zeira explained. Lididi mefarsh liminei Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda explained to me the yediya chaya. If it's a mamzer that everybody knows he's a mamzer, so there's no concern he's going to get mixed into Klal Yisrael, so the Eibishter lets him live. The lo yediya lo chaya. But if it's unknown that he's a mamzer, he's not going to live. The yediya v'lo yediya. If it's known and not known, so some know and some don't know, so then atlas adari chaya, he could live for 3 generations tfei lo chaya. More than this, he does not live. So we see that sometimes a mamzer could live past 10 generations. So Taisus over here says, so when Rabbi Eliezer was asked the question, what's the halacha of a mamzer past 10 generations, why didn't he answer? Because he thought that they're talking even about a mamzer that was known to everybody. So therefore he didn't want to answer that question. Okay, now the Gemara brings a story about this. There was a mamzer in the neighborhood of Rabami. Rabami announced regarding this individual, the mamzer that he's a mamzer. Bachi Vazl, he was crying from this embarrassment that he notified everyone that he's a mamzer. Amalei, so Rabami told him, Chayim nasati lach, I gave you life. If it wouldn't be known, then you wouldn't live. Now the Gemara goes to the halacha of the Nesinim in the Mishnah. So Amar Rav Chana Barade said about the Isser of the Nesinim. What's the source of this Isser? Nesinim, David Gazar Aleim. The Nesinim, the fact that they can't marry into Klal Yisrael, David HaMelech was geyser this upon them. So now what does this mean? What was David HaMelech geyser? So according to Rashi's opinion, that the Isser of them being allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael, this is what David HaMelech was geyser. There's a Taisus about this as well later in the next Amud here, a long Taisus. But because Be'emes, we had before in the Gemara that regarding the 7 nations, it says, Leitis Chatenbam. And before in the Gemara, we had that Rav said, Leitis Chatenbam regarding the 7 nations means that even after they're Megayer, there's the love of Leitis Chatenbam. If so, you don't need David HaMelech to be geyser on the Nesinim that they shouldn't enter into Klal Yisrael. So, according to Rashi, Rav Chana Barada is arguing on Rava. Rav Chana Barada is saying, no, Leitis Chatenbam only is Isser on them when they are not Megayer, but after they're Megayer they would be allowed. And the Isser of the Nesinim is only for this, is only because of this that David HaMelech was geyser. And the Gemara here brings the story. Shenema, the pasuk says, "Vayikra Melech lagevainim," that David HaMelech called the Gevainim Vayemer Aleim, and he told them, "Vagevainim loim ibnei Yisrael heima," that the Gevainim are not from the Yidden. He was geyser on them not to marry into Klal Yisrael. What's the story? What happened? My time gazar alayu. Why did he decree this upon them? So there's a long story here. We'll start the story today. The continuation is tomorrow. The pasuk says, "Vayihi Rab b'mei David shalosh shanim." There was a hunger in the times of David HaMelech 3 years. Shana chashana, year after year. Now Shana Rishayna, after the first year of the hunger, Amalehem, so he said to the Yidden, Shem Avodas Gechavim yesh bechem. Maybe there's people that are serving Avodah Zarah amongst you. The pasuk says, Vavatem lekim acherim v'shtachavisam lehem v'atzeres l'shamayim v'leyeh matar. If there's Avodah Zarah, then there's no rain. They went and they did not find anyone serving Avodah Zarah. Shnia, after the 2nd year of the hunger, Amalehem, so he says to everybody, Shem maybe there's Avedas amongst you of immoral relationships. The pasuk says, Vayimnu revivim u'malkish, the Eibishter holds back the rain, malkish lehoya, that is, umetzach isha zayna hoya lacha. That's because there's a isha zayna amongst you. But matzu, again they inspected, they found nothing. Shlishis, after the 3rd year, Amalam Shem Paiskate Stokke Barabim Yesh Bechem, they nice them. Maybe there's people amongst you that pledge money for tzedakah in public and they don't give. The Chsiv, the pasuk says, Nisim v'ruach, and v'geshemayim, there's wind, but there's no rain because of Ish Mishal b'matas shaker, a person that praises himself by giving tzedakah and he doesn't give. But they inspected v'lei matzah and didn't find this problem either. So Amar, now David HaMelech said, Eina David Tali Elebi. So this is something that's up to me. I better see myself what I could do to take care of this. Miyad, immediately, Vayivakish David es Pnei Hashem, David went and asked the Eibishter. How did he ask? Maihi, Omer Reish Lakish, Shal B'Urim V'Tumim. He asked by the Kohen Gadol, by the Urim V'Tumim, to give him an answer what the reason for the hunger is. My mashma, how do we know Pnei Hashem is the Urim V'Tumim? Omer Abalaza, Asye Pnei, Pnei. We compare the word Pnei here to the word Pnei that it says by the Urim V'Tumim. Ksivacha, here it says Vayivakish David es Pnei Hashem. Uksiv Hasam, and there it says V'Shaleh B'Mishpat Urim L'Fnei Hashem. What was the answer? Vayemer Hashem el Shaul, because of Shaul HaMelech, vel beis adamim al shehemis hagivainim, and because of the blood that was spilled, that he killed the Givainim. So the Gemara explains, el Shaul means shlei nispat ka'alocha. After the Plishtim killed Shaul HaMelech, he was not eulogized properly. That's one reason why there's a punishment that is a hunger. And also, vel beis adamim al shehemis hagivainim means that Shaul HaMelech killed the Givainim. And because he killed the Givainim, the Eibusha brought this hunger. Do we find ever such a thing that Shaul killed the Givainim? He didn't kill the Givainim. Ella, rather, what happened is there was a city Noiv, a city of Kainim, and Shaul HaMelech thought or was told that they were meited b'malchus, that they were helping David HaMelech and they were meited against him. So he held it a chayiv misa. So he killed the entire city of Kainim. Now these Kainim, the Givainim, as mentioned before, that Yeshua made these Givainim, that they were ones that were water carriers and wood choppers, they served the Kainim of this city, and the Kainim of this city provided water and food for the Givainim. But now that all the Kainim of this city were killed, so the Givainim had nothing to eat. The Torah considers it, the Pasuk considers it as if Shaul HaMelech killed these Givainim, and therefore the Eibusha brought this hunger upon Klal Yisrael. Now the continuation of the story and how this brought to the Gzeira that David HaMelech made on the Givainim that they should not marry into Klal Yisrael, we'll see in the Hemshech of the Gemara tomorrow.